cut it down to a reasonable level.
That's good. That's good.
Bachelor number 2.
The funny thing is, I know what you're talking about.
Like long walks on the beach.
Number 1. You're supposed to
Oh, right, yeah. Cool.
It's an age thing.
Yep.
This one right here.
I think you're 3.
I'm 3. Oh, God. I'm standing between them and butter. Them all.
Okay, thank you guys for attending today's last breakout session. This session is called Bringing Anaerobic Digestion Full Circle. And we have 3 great panelists today. I'm going to introduce the first one. John Lee, right here, is a business development manager for McClure. He has over 10 years of experience in the water and wastewater industry in various business sectors, and is partnering with the City of Muscatine and Iowa State University for his most recent project. John is a graduate of the University of Iowa with an undergraduate degree in biomedical engineering and a graduate degree in civil environmental engineering. Thank you so much, and please welcome John Lee.
Thank you, guys. So John Lee, I'm with McClure Engineering Company. We're a full civil consulting firm. But as she mentioned, my past background is in biomedical engineering, where you study the human body as an engineered system. And that kind of ties into the interests and the ideas that I have in going through this. So kind of ties back. And then I, had some interest in wastewater equipment and spent some time in wastewater equipment industry. And then, as she mentioned, master's in civil environmental, where I actually learned what wastewater treatment process means and learned to design some of them. So that's kind of the background that I have. And this project got started with the stars aligning with me mentioning something to John, and John already had a very good project going. So I'll be kind of talking about the initial part, the side stream project that we have going, and then John will talk about the actual main project that's going to help to create those biogas. So as I mentioned, I see the parallel and things, similarities in how these things work. And as if you eat organic material, food, whatever you ingest, you make energy out of it. And that's the same thing that I saw in wastewater plants. You put in organic materials and you wait, and the cetogens and methanogens will react to make methane out of it. And it's kind of the similarities that I see in the two worlds. And what I learned also is that this is the Midwest, so people know about cows quite a bit, probably more than I do. But the cow is a walking digester machine. It does that. It does better than any other live animal, and it actually has a very good system that has grown over the years that can teach us a lot about how digesters should be working. So as I was kind of studying up on this and reading different articles, one article that I found in the Water, Environment, and Technology, WNT, in November of 2017, is an article that the DOD and I think EPA partnered to do a project in Denver. And what it showed is, you guys seen these numbers all week, but we waste about 0.7 pounds per person per day. which becomes 164 million tons of municipal solid waste discarded in 2011, and 21% all that goes to landfill is food waste. So we know it's a huge problem that the food waste is not making it into the digesters, because the result of this article basically stated that they've looked at all these different criterias along with all these different ways of utilizing food waste, and the only one that checks every single box, which is it established technology, limited operator input, renewable energy, reduced valuable product, low land requirement, good public acceptance, treat large volumes, scalable and portable. The only technology that checks every single box is an anaerobic digester. And you can also see, though, composting is very good. Composting, I know, is a hot topic that everybody talked about here, and I truly stand behind it. But the only difference is you get energy out of doing the anaerobic digestion process. So I think that's why we are here, and that's why we want to share information with you guys. So to get into the specific about the project, this is a project, like I said, kind of the stars aligning. I've been taking a lot of interest. I saw the similarities in what I studied in the past into what this is. And then reading that article, I think that same week I read that article, I met with John. And John already had a project going where he was upgrading his digesters, and also getting new receiving stations on his site. And I basically sparked the question of, hey, in your receiving station, what are you planning to put in there? And you mentioned food, you mentioned industrial waste and different things. And then I asked the second question of, do you know how much gas you're going to be producing if you mix these things? And what's the best recipe? Do you know what the best ratio is to put these in? And that's kind of how this project started. I just asked some simple questions that I had in my mind, and John really responded to it. And at the same time, I was working with Dr. Z.U. Wen from Iowa State University, who is a food science professor. And the professor and I've been talking about different processes, but one of the things I knew he had capability of doing is doing a small jar test. And what a small jar test is, you put different things in there and you see the methane potential by mixing it into small jars. So you're not taking a full scale, but you're seeing it in the small scale to see, hey, this is good, this is not good, this ratio is better, that ratio is not good. So this is how it got started. And then CIRAS, Brenda Martin, Brian Muff of CIRAS is two people that I've been working very closely with. And these people, when I mentioned this project, they jumped on it right away and they said, how much money do you need? So we basically got them to fund 50% of it, while the City of Muscatine chipped another 50%, and we got this started. And then just to state, the main purpose of the study was to mix 10 different feed stocks along with his biosolids created from his wastewater plant to see what the best recipe is to be able to run your digesters to produce the most amount of methane gas. So that was the main purpose of doing this project. So here are the categories, and here are the feedstock that I put in there. I divided by food waste, fat, oil, and grease, and then industrial waste. And the reason why I did it, I think we had a good group of things to divide it by. So food waste, we took some different mixes of, sauces and different mixes of fruits and veggies. And then the fat, oil, grease is a lot of these companies that have, their processes, DAF processes, where they create a lot of fat, oil, grease tanks that they have to ship out somewhere. And then industrial waste is something that John was able to get, to test with us. And the process that you go through while you do the small jar test is you basically start mixing. Is this red button the? Yes. There we go. So, yeah, I'm talking about new technology, and I don't even know how to use this. So what we did was we took his biosolids, and then we took these different mixes. We put it in small jars here and started mixing it. And after a certain amount of period, what we did was we took every single one out and started putting it into small jars. And what small jars is, you agitate, you make sure you have a good fluid system. And what it does is it starts producing gas, and you draw that gas off. And what you do with that gas is you put into a machine called GC analyzer. And that GC analyzer basically tells you how much of that gas is methane, how much of that is carbon dioxide. So we did this, and then Dr. Wen, he's actually a food science major, not a wastewater anaerobic digester. So we had kind of things that we requested, and units and such things weren't kind of different from what he was thinking. But I think we got a real good results from a simple test we did. I think one of the things I know we missed is we didn't really seed anything before, so we relied on the bacterial that's just within the feedstock to really digest. But I think if we were to redo this again, we know some of the steps that we would retake to make it better. But the exciting part, so here are the results, 3 different categories, the results that I've seen. I chose these three because it kind of was a good representative of what I saw. And as I mentioned, the two processes that take place in the digester is acetogenesis and methanogenesis. Acetogenesis is basically the acetogens, the bacteria, making and taking all the food, whatever you take, hydrolyzing it, and then taking the hydrolyzed material, you make VFAs, volatile fatty acids. And the VFAs are taken up by methanogens, and then that's what creates the methane. So there's a two-step process here in the digesters that we all see it in one large tank. But as I was going through this process, I saw some trends. Acetogens like acid. Methanogens don't like acid. Food waste, when you start digesting it, it digests so quick that you start making a very acidic environment, and therefore your methanogens can't kick in. The environment that you live in is very important. Therefore, the methanogens are not able to kick in. That's why it only has one spike for all three trends. And if you look, I know these numbers are very small, but if you look, the percent of methane is what it's showing. You're looking at 0.6%, 0.2%, at the most 23%. And that's because you didn't allow the methanogens to grow. And that's the trend of the food waste that we saw. All the food waste we digested always had one curve, and that was it. You go to fat, oil, or grease, these things are a little bit harder to digest, so it takes longer. Therefore, it does not make an acidic environment. And that's why if you look closely, I shrunk this to fit it here, but it has this first bump, and then it's got the second bump. And what that shows is, okay, acetogens you're able to digest, you created enough food for the methanogens to start taking, methanogens start overtaking it, and you made a lot of methane. Therefore, the second bump here is the methane producing. And then you can match that with the percentages of methane. If you look in that 12 to 20 days, it starts making big jumps. And the same thing with industrial waste, so easy to digest that it makes an environment where methanogens cannot kick in, and therefore it has a trend of one jump and that's it. So that's kind of the trend that I saw in three different methods, but I know that we and cows all eat and we make energy out of it. How do we do it? And I thought about what is that the cows do that we do to make these food into energy that our digesters can't. And one thing you don't really think about is your saliva, right? Your saliva is actually a very alkali solution. Not only does it help you to take the food down your throat, it actually prepares your food to be digested in the way that it needs to. So then we asked Dr. Wen to say, hey, how about pH adjustment right before you actually mix it in? So he went ahead and did that. And this is what I really want to share with you guys. Food waste, we think that it's too fast. It has to be in its own digesters. You can't mix it with anything else. But what we did is we mixed it. And we looked at the digestion after you pH adjust. And look at the huge difference you see. You're looking at, let's just look at day 7. This is pH adjusted. This is not pH adjusted. Day 7, percent of methane, 0.1%. Day 7, 6.2%. But then you start looking at the volume, 0.27 milliliters, 57 milliliters. And then you see the next day with the pH adjust, 297. See, I still haven't figured out why it decreases, but anyways, so this is the point that I'm trying to make, is that if you really look at the same days and how fast and how well it digests it, the pH adjusted step really is a big addition to what you can do with food waste. Because the food waste, what we saw was that it digests too quick, therefore it's not beneficial, but yet if you had a pH adjustment step, it actually becomes a very good waste. But pH adjustment is not always a cost-beneficial method because you got to have the source to add things. So that's why I believe the mixture, the co-digestion of certain products makes these good balance so you have a good outcome. And it's basically, I was telling folks that it's basically like your mom telling you to eat your peas and carrots. Don't just eat one thing. Diversify what you eat. Grow the bacteria that can break things as you eat diverse things, and therefore you'll have a healthy diet for your digesters, for your stomach, which will result in more energy than it currently is. So I think the next steps that I see in this is for John and I to keep working together, putting our heads together, to come up with a new scale-up testing, because I know we have a good recipe, but it didn't really replicate his process. So I think if we can find money, if we can do things the right way, I'd love to have a scale-up testing to find that optimal recipe. I think that will really help John to create the most amount of methane in his limited digester volume. And that's what we want to do. And then, different digester processes such as single versus multi-phase. I keep talking about the multi-phase digesters because you're splitting the acetogens and methanogens. And that, I think, really helps to create two different environments that you can maximize their potential. And then, one of the things that I really want to talk to this group and anybody that's listening is that we did this with Muscatine just out of the blue. But the potential that I see is that if I can do this study for different parts of the state or different states in general, I know there are a lot of literature out there and there are a lot of folks that put numbers from literature, but let's actually digest what you have in your city and see the potential that your city has. And that's the final point that I want to make, that I want you guys to remember, that if there's anything that you have questions about, you can always contact me, and love to help in any way I can. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I am now going to introduce John Koch, who probably a lot of you already know him. He's the second year he's been here. John Koch is the director for the City of Muscatine's Water Pollution Control Plant and has 17 years of experience in the water and wastewater industry. He has operated over 50 different treatment facilities between Colorado, Wyoming, New Mexico, and Iowa. John also has a BA from Iowa State University in Journalism and Public Relations and has an Iowa Grade 4 wastewater operator's license. Everyone, please welcome John Koch.
And I'm super cash today. I'm actually have something on here that says Muscatine Pollinator Project. So I'm all about self-promotion today a little bit. This is our group of Muscatine. It's where the food starts. We're talking about what to do with the food after we have no idea what to do with it. But pollinators actually produce about 30% of the food that we produce, that we eat. So they're important. So I'm promoting that. Also, self-promotion is a big part of what we do. I wore this hat too, where the Muscatine plant is actually called the Water and Resource Recovery Facility now. And I have my little project on the back of the hat. So a big part of what I'm going to talk about is self-promotion being very important to what your program. If you're trying to build a program, promotion is important to get that word out. In finding new feedstocks, number one, I had a lot of that happen to me just from a news article that went out, newspaper, or the KW, Channel 8, whatever, from Quad Cities came down, did a little interview, and all of a sudden I got a phone call about 2 days later saying, hey, I got somebody who's interested in this, happens to be one of the largest food producers out of the Quad Cities, and it's going to be a big feed source for us. So anyway, I was here last year talking about Marv, the Muscatine Area Resource Recovery for Vehicles and Energy. I was all promoting and saying, yeah, we're ready to go. We're going to start building this thing, and I'll come here next year and tell you how it's running. Well, I'm afraid I cannot do that today because I actually did a little more research when I left here. Last spring, I went around trying to find more places that are doing the things that we wanted to do, and I found a guy all the way out in Hermitage, Pennsylvania, and he says, however big you're building this thing, it ain't big enough. Because you're going to have so much stuff coming in, you're not going to know what to do with it. So build it bigger. So I went back to the drawing board, kicked around my engineers a little bit, and actually moved it from where I had it, made it bigger. I actually found a way to save some money on it as well. So I'm not here to tell you that it's up and running, I'm afraid to say, but hopefully next year I will be able to tell you it's up and running. So of course, when we started this, I saw the big flare going off at our plant, and it kind of made me think about how we're running things in the city. So our philosophy, coming to the sustainability of everything, everybody's probably seen one of these as well: sustainability, people, profit, and planet. Where that meets in the middle, that's your best option for where you're going to be a more sustainable community. And the planet part, of course, wastewater plants are very good at taking in the waste, creating something better out of it in biosolids, and then putting a product back into the environment in clean water. The people part, there's a good connection usually. We give tours and people know what we're doing, so we have that connection. The profit area is where we really lack, especially municipalities. They don't think like a business very often. We got our job, we're doing our thing. Don't rock the boat, don't do anything different. Let's just kind of keep things status quo. Well, that didn't really set well with me, and so I said, we need to do things differently. We need to act more like a business, and we need to actually bring some more opportunities to our community for that. And then, of course, I ran into these people that, like you've met this week, and got the food pyramid all set up as well, and started hearing a lot about that in the last 6 to 8 years or so, at least for me. I'm sure it's been around longer than that, maybe not, I don't know. But it fit in well for us, and of course we're fourth in line. We don't doing the best thing, but the industrial waste where we can actually make and hit all of these. Am I going to hit the right one too? Yeah. Energy, fertilizer, and water. This is the nexus of where you're trying to find the best beneficial use for these waste, and we actually hit that pretty well with our Marv project. So. Started out, here's the flare of all the energy going right up off into the atmosphere, which of course nobody likes to see. How do we capture that? How do we reuse it? That was the first impetus for me to start on this project. The second one here, you see these little ketchup packets. We have the largest Heinz manufacturing facility in the country in Iowa, in Muscatine. And they put about 10 million of these out a day. They make that many, these giant rolls. And you can imagine the waste of getting that thing started and when that doesn't work right and everything else like that. So they were just wholesale throwing about 10 tons a day, not just ketchup packets, but gravy jars, barbecue sauce, you name it, whatever they make. About 10 tons a day going to the landfill. So we said, there's got to be a potential there to capture that organic and bring it back and make some energy out of it. So, food waste receiving is fun, I find out. Actually, the first thing I did is I bought this grinder, I put it sideways, and just started throwing stuff in. And that's always cool to watch when things are just chewed up and come flying out, and everything's, this stuff's flying out of the top of it. It was really, really cool. So we had a little fun with that. Then, of course, you got to get serious and figure out what's really going to work, large scale, and do a better job of that. So the different ways that you can start a food waste project is you can be Janesville, Wisconsin, and just have somebody dump a load of money in your lap. That was really fun. So they were like, well, this is really easy. Why isn't everybody doing this? Well, there's a grant that was out there, and it stopped in 2012. Janesville was one of the only ones that really took advantage of it. Now there's no money for anybody else to do it, so there's very little motivation, and it's hard to get those things started again. Or you could be mandated to do it. San Diego, California, this is the food bank out here. This is actually the machine that we're planning on buying, a scaled size of it. But California, or the East Coast too, they're mandating. You cannot throw organics in the landfill if you're a large producer. So they had to come up with something to do. And the food banks, like you say, they end up with stuff they can't get rid of either. So they had to do something with it. So they had a machine, and I actually was out. This is Larry Hare, the director of the Des Moines Water Reclamation Authority. We were out there at the same biogas conference, and he was talking that year, and I think I talked the next year. But down in California and San Diego, they're doing great works to get things started like that. You could be a large market demand. This Kansas City, this is a fog receiving station, fats, oils, and greases from restaurants, interceptors, basically. If you have a lot of restaurants, it works really well. You just put a little pipe out, and all the haulers show up, give you all this material, and away you go, and you got a nice setup. Well, in Muscatine, we have about 5 large interceptors that need to be emptied, and we don't have a big metro area around us, so there wasn't a whole lot of demand for that either. Though there are some that drive up and down and want a place to dump, so we are going to actually be able to capture that, but initially there just wasn't that kind of demand. Or you could just be crazy, which I think I like to fit into that category of just being a little bit nuts enough to say, I don't really care. We're going to do something because it's the right thing to do and it needs to be done. And if we have to be the first to do it, so be it. We'll be the first, and just kind of take a leap of faith. I started my project, the Marv project, at about $800,000 was my budget. And every time I made another crazy leap, it went up by about $1 million until I was almost about $4.2 million. I thought maybe that was a little much. I didn't really have that much that I could do, so again, went back to the engineers. We scaled it around, and I'm down around about $2.5 million. But every time I did that, I took it back to council, and because of some self-promotion, and because they kept seeing this over and over, and because the community saw it over and over and over again, already knew about it, they just kept saying go, 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 go. Every time it went up in cost, they just kept saying, yep, we still want to do this, we still want to follow that, and that was has been why this really happens, because you could run into a council that says, no way, now your money goes. Water and resource recovery facilities, this is the new term. Everybody says, I know, you're just renaming the same, you're polishing the turd, right? Well, it's not really. I mean, this is really more in line with what we do than anybody has ever really had before. Water pollution control was kind of a really bad term for what we did, because really now water is a resource, but we're recovering water and we're recovering resources. These facilities are now gleaning phosphorus out of their biosolids to make a phosphorus fertilizer. You're taking the biosolids, which is a fertilizer. You can take all kinds of different things from this material that's coming in, and you can take in more material. Because you know how to process it, because you have the pumps, because you have the facility, because you have the knowledge and the personnel sitting there ready to go, these places make perfect facilities to start taking new material like solid waste food. So this is a little design, and I like it because it's just really cool. It has all these little colored lines and everything. But this is our wastewater plant, part of it anyway. And I had a traffic model built for my engineers. I said, how is the flow of trucks going to happen in my plant? Because I kept going around all these treatment plants and says, oh yeah, we take fog all the time. I'm like, well, where's your hookup? Where do they have to go? Well, they come in the front gate, then they go around to back here. It's all the way back in building X in the back corner of the plant, in this torturous path they had to go back there to get to. Again, they're not thinking like a business. These people who go out and clean these interceptors are running a business, and they don't want to take the time. The harder you make it for them to do, the less likely they are going to do it. So the easier you make it to run, the more likely you're going to get more business, and if you run it that way. So this really, the trucks can come in here, they go in one gate, they come here, they offload, and they go right back out the other gate, and away they go. Nice and easy, open 24/7, they can come and do it, swipe card, so they just pull up, swipe their card, we know who they are, they hook up, it measures the amount that they offload, and off they go. Otherwise, we have refuse trucks when we have a solid waste collection, like from schools, cafeterias, different things like that. They drive up, they drive into the building, they tip on the floor, they drive out the other side of the building, and away they go. Not, trying to cut out motion. You don't want anybody backing up. You don't want anybody doing anything that they don't have to do. The trucks that come in full, just the cargo trucks, will come in right here. They do back up to a loading dock, and then away they go. So it's nice, easy flow. When we offload the trucks, it comes up through here. The machine that's going to run this is right in here, so they can just go out of the truck, into the machine, out of the truck, into the machine, and it's nice and easy. So when you design something like this, or if you're thinking about it, if you're hearing about it, make sure people are really thinking about how this flows, how it's going to work the most efficiently, and how you're going to get people in and out, because the easier it is, the more customers you're going to get. And people will go to your facility instead of another facility, even if it's closer, if your facility is easier for them to get in and out of. It's not only about cost, sometimes it's about ease of operation, everything else. So, digesters. These are the new digesters we had built in 2010. These are floating mesophilic draft tube mixed digesters, floating covers. Pretty typical municipal wastewater. Your standard municipal wastewater engineer will know how to design any single one of these. The thing is, when it came to food digesters, I started asking the same people, and it's like, well, we're not really sure how to do that. So I started looking around a little bit more about how a real food digester is made and what we can do differently for different kinds of things. And I ran into DVO, these guys that make egg digesters. And egg digesters are designed to take a lot of different kinds of materials, and they're really kind of bulletproof. And it seemed like an interesting tack to take. It also means this is the end of old aeration basins, and they're square digesters. And anybody knows you don't make square digesters with a mixer in the middle, because you end up packing stuff in. They just don't work very well. But this happens to be, DVO happens to make a plug flow digester that's square, that's rectangular. But I thought it would fit well to retrofit some existing processes that we already have. So all the piping and everything we need is still there. Everything's kind of set up. All they have to do is drop in their own equipment, and away we go. And new digesters were going to be costing in the realm of $1.5 million. This is going to be closer to $600,000 or $700,000. So it's good cost savings as well. So Marv, if anybody read the first slide, Muscatine area resource recovery. The last two are for vehicles and energy. And that was just kind of these were my evenings sitting out drinking martinis thinking of a name for this thing. It kind of came out of that and scribbling on my dry erase on my refrigerator. And and it kind of stuck. Marv, I kind of like it, you know. It's memorable. People, I think, remember it. But the vehicles and energy part of this, once you make the gas, you have a cleaning facility here that you're going to clean that gas to a level acceptable to whomever is going to receive that material. If you go to the pipeline, you're at a very high level of cleaning. You're at a very high level of how that gas has to be delivered to the receiver or whoever is going to take that gas. But then you can get it out, and they actually, then the trucks that pull it out, no matter where you are, if somebody pulls it out in California, even though you've made that gas, put it in the pipeline in Iowa, Californians can say, hey, I used that piece of gas, and you can get a credit for that. Or you can actually load it onto trucks that have large, tubes on it that actually pressurize, and you can drive it around, and you can deliver that gas as well. So these are kind of some of the different deliveries we're looking at and how we're going to get this gas to market. We're not really sure yet. Anybody has $5 or $6 million laying around they want to give us, come talk to me after. Okay. So, what kind of gas are we talking about here? Well, equivalencies, of course, you have to talk about when you're talking about a liquid and a gas. But the initial study we had on the lower amount of material we thought bringing in a top level of about 880 gallons a day, a diesel equivalent. So if you could imagine, just by taking the food waste that's in your city, not a very big city either, but throwing 880 gallons of diesel back into your community for free. That means somebody didn't have to produce it, pump it out of the ground, refine it, ship it to your city. It's just sitting there ready to go. And I think that is kind of actually a median number for us now. I think we should be able to do a lot better than that. So these are the kind of numbers you're talking about. And Muscatine is 25,000 people. We are bringing outside stock in as well, but that's not all. That's, when you talk about Des Moines and other places, this number gets really, really big on the amount of fuel that you're talking about. So my conclusion on this and wrapping up is to say that we need more places to do this. We need people to be just a little crazy, to be just a little bit more sticking your neck out there and saying, hey, we should really start to think about doing this. Take it to your councils, take it to people who will listen to you, anyone who will listen to you. Start buying hats, t-shirts, and throwing them at them and say, hey, this is something we want to do. Your community is going to embrace this like crazy, especially the kids and everybody else who's in the cafeterias. They know how much food they're throwing away. They know that this is something they want to do with this, and this is a great way to get in. But it takes 3 to 5 years of just getting that groundwork going. This isn't the kind of thing you're going to have where you're just going to say, send out an RFP in the next month or so, start building digesters and bringing in food. I've been working on this for about 6 years. We're actually finally going to start putting bids out here in October. So 6 years plus on working on that. It wasn't all just trying to build this. It was a lot of research and a lot of time and everything else. But it does take some time to do that, but we got to get more people doing it. There needs to be more incentives and grants. This is completely self-funded through Muscatine. I didn't get a dime of grants for this. Everybody's like, oh, you should go to the DNR swap grant. I'm like, yeah, it's $10,000. Like for a $3 million project, I mean, you get it. I mean, I'll still apply for it, and it's still there, but it's, there really isn't a whole lot of money out there for us to be drawing upon. And I, as I brought up the first day to a Congressman Young, the ag producers, there needs to be some kind of a mandate for them. And I think really the nexus of the water nutrient problems that we have and everything else that's going on with this is going to be a big part of how we start convincing people that these digesters need to go in at the hog facilities and everywhere else, because it's really a great way to start to manage that. Instead of just throwing this stuff out on the ground, we know that that's causing a huge problem downstream for everybody else. Now, if we can grab on another priority to attach to these, I think we're really going to gain some traction. I think right now we're just kind of spinning our wheels. Wisconsin had a great champion of this about 15 years ago. That's why Wisconsin has all these digesters. We haven't had that champion that said, hey, we're going to start putting digesters in these ag facilities, and we need to figure out a way to get that and get that ball rolling. Yeah, waste has always been with us, so let's make it work for us. That's it.
Thank you, John. Oh, it's not that short. It's a little bit short. It's short-ish. Okay, our next speaker is Tom Nowakowski, and he is all the way here today from Madison? Okay, long drive. Fun drive. Good to hear that. Tom is the Energy Innovations Manager at the Wisconsin Office of Energy Innovation. Tom became interested in solving air quality issues while pursuing meteorology at the University of UW-Madison, University of Wisconsin in Madison. That interest grew into a career computer modeling and protecting the environment and eventually working with a wide spectrum of businesses, including the agriculture and food processing industries. And this is to help them develop a business case to embrace energy efficiency, energy production, and environmental performance. Thank you, Tom, for being here. Let's all give him a round of applause.
So as Jennifer said, I work with the Office of Energy Innovation. That's actually Wisconsin's state energy office. So we're federally funded, but we work within the confines of state government. And I'll let it catch up. So two of the main things that we do in our office are educate and incentivize folks to do great energy stuff. Wisconsin is we are a net energy importer. We import about 97% of the energy that we use, and the other 3% we try to find things like biogas and hydro and other things to do. So we're always looking to try to do our energy. What we're trying to do with energy use is minimize it and find really clever ways to look at new stuff to do. So that's kind of what I do. I educate and incentivize. And what does incentivize mean? We take a lot of federal pass-through money and try to get it in the hands of folks to try new crazy stuff, like John. The educating doesn't just stop, with folks like you guys. It also goes home. I have a newly minted freshman high school son, and last night he saw me going through a couple of the slides, and he says, what are you doing? I said, I'm going to talk about biodigesters to some folks in Iowa down in Des Moines. He's like, that's appropriate. He said a bunch of Hawkeyes and talking about cow poop. That's good. I'm like, okay, this is the teachable moment. I'm like, listen, Magellan, I didn't say Iowa City. I said Des Moines, not Hawkeyes, Panthers. So just so he knows where his dad goes during the day. So what is a badger really doing down here? Well, like John said, he's one of the crazy guys here in Iowa. Well, there's a whole bunch of crazy folks in Wisconsin who's adopted digester technology. That the light bulbs that you see here, we did a study about 5 years ago, a biogas study about 5 years ago, and we're just up for redoing it again. So the study that we did was more qualitative. It was kind of like an inventory of like who's doing digesting, where are the digesters, what types of digesters are out there. So those light bulbs that you see represent like 4 different factions. The yellow ones there are landfills. The blue ones are food processing industries. The red ones are agricultural industry. The green ones are not landfills, water recovery facilities. So, and then we came up with some really cool heat maps because I work in the public sector, and what gets folks really interested, especially legislators, is when you give them a map and you give them their district and you put a big like red dot over the top of it, because they either think, yes, it's good, or this is not good. So heat maps work really good within public service. So I purposely made them nice and small so you really can't verify my information. No, that's not true. All of this stuff is online, and what this is a snapshot in time, like 4 to 5 years ago. And so one of the reasons what we're doing now is we're going to go back and take a look at what's going on, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. And I'm also a map freak, so that's why the maps are up there. Oop. Let's see. So when we did this snapshot in time, what do we see? We have about 172 anaerobic digesters spread across the state, generating about 140 megawatts of electrical capacity. How do we calculate that? we had all kinds of like funky algorithms that were, and that may be verifiable back then and maybe less verifiable now. But let's just say that there's quite a bit of generating capacity. And of those 172, back when we took a snapshot 4 or 5 years ago, I would venture to guess like at least 75% of the folks that were doing digesters had some type of purchase power agreement with their utility, and they were getting probably like 10 to 12, 10 to 15 cents per kilowatt hour. If you go now and you take a look, and this is one of the reasons that there you go, 4. You've seen between 2 and 4 cents kilowatt hour. So their business model that they used even 5 years ago is not sustainable. So we have this landscape of really cool, shiny stomachs digesting, and what are we going to do with them? Well, that's why we're going to get a couple of focus groups, and we're going to go out to our whole stakeholder group here and see what folks are really planning on doing. And I'll talk about what some folks are doing already and what we anecdotally, but we really need some hard numbers. When we did this study 4 or 5 years ago, it was more qualitative. We just get a laundry list of who's doing what, why are you doing it. This time around, we're going to not be so easy on folks. It's going to be more metrics driven. We want to see, like where you're taking, how much are you taking, what are you generating, where is it going, who are you, so we're going to do it. We're really going to dig down a little bit deeper. I wasn't with the Office of Energy Innovation when this study was, but I am now, and so I'm kind of a data-driven guy, and that's what we're going to be doing. Primary feedstock sources, egg byproducts, food and cheese processing. We've got a lot of cows, and we make a lot of milk and cheese, and we'll talk about that too. And then waste treatment and manufacturing. So we have a lot of, there's Ore-Ida, there's Frito-Lay, there's a number of facilities down in just the southern part of the state that have a lot of high value. And the vernacular in Wisconsin has really changed. Like 15, 18 years ago when we first started doing this, we had to try to convince people that it was not a waste, that it was a feedstock. And that, we call it liquid gold. Now folks will call it liquid gold, right? So we just think of anything, you really have communities and so municipalities and businesses looking at any piece of their waste that's going out. It's not waste. It's, it's part of their value model. So, and how did that happen? About 15 years ago, we had a Secretary of Agriculture that was really a proponent of digesters, and he really talked them up. I remember going to one of the first bilateral meetings at the legislature where they brought, Republicans and Democrats together, and they were saying, hey, this is a win-win for everybody. We've got plenty of feedstock. We've got these things, and at that time, it was a win-win because they were producing power. They were being able to sell it to the grid. So we had a lot of early adopters, and we had neighbors, farmers talking to farmers saying, this is what we're doing. And we had DVO, we had a couple of other manufacturers of digesters within the state that were willing to support the effort. So that's how the initial kernel of that slug load of digester started, and it just kind of like barrel rolled from there. And I can talk a little bit about that. The original biogas survey that we did, determined the status and biogas use in Wisconsin and provide an update for policymakers. Those are those cool heat maps that we came up with to, draw a target over somebody's county, and they're like, hey, what's going on here? Survey questions, what are the barriers to biogas utilization? These are the same. So we asked these 4 or 5 years ago. We're going to go back and ask the same questions, but we're going to find ways to provide better metrics around them instead of just like a yes, no, or just being qualitative. We're going to really try to attach some value to it. Survey results, this is a big surprise. Cost concern and permitting and regulation and lack of coordination. So I spent about 20 years working for the Department of Natural Resources first before coming to the State Energy Office, and we would have occasion to talk with one another, but not necessarily occasion to really work on projects with one another. And I can tell you, I'll talk about a little project that we've got, a little $15 million digester that we've got going on now that came as a result of state agencies needing to work together, and I'll explain why. Let's see. So this is one of those cool heat maps, digester feedstock. So we went through and looked at the food manufacturing industry in Wisconsin, and you start to draw the maps, and you see near the Door Peninsula there, and near Green Bay, there's a lot of food processing that goes on. There's a lot of dairying operations, so you got that dark circle over there. The one that's over, let's see, this one right here. So here's the Madison area right here, and there's that big circle over here. There was a lot of industries that were supporting Oscar Mayer and the craft food. Well, the map that we're going to come up with to replace this one's not. This is going to look significantly different because there is no Oscar Mayer. They're not packing wieners there anymore. It's going to be an incubator for new businesses. So that's all going to be done. This down here, in the Milwaukee area, there's still a lot of meat packing and a lot of slaughter plant operations going on there. There is also a huge digester that's here that's run by the Potawatomi. And one of the things that they do is they take in food waste from all of their casino operations, and that's why I'll get you in touch with them, because they have a really interesting mix of folks that are a really interesting mix of slurry that they use from a lot of different of their operations. And in fact, it's their column, their bug column has become so efficient that they're really finding ways to, always looking for ways to kind of like wake them up and kind of like shake it up a little bit. So they've been taking in waste, a lot of food waste from the Milwaukee area restaurants as well. So, let's see. And what we found for digester drivers, one thing when I talk to folks about getting into a digester and is it really right for their operation, whether it's manufacturing or ag, there shouldn't be just one or two drivers that you're really looking at in your economic model. It really has to be a broad spectrum of things, because what happens in 5 years when your PPA goes from 10 cents to 4 cents, now you find yourself not sustainable, right? So you have to find something else. And so we look at a value proposition map that has like multi pathways, and so getting folks to like think more than just one, just getting a return on one thing, or if they are taking advantage of an incentive that we provide, like a grant funding, they know that grant funding is going to sunset at some point, and they're going to have to become sustainable. So really looking at a business model that carries beyond, and being able to look beyond what they're doing. Let's see, and then policy, low carbon fuel standard. We can really get into the weeds in that last one. That's the subject for a lot of lunch hour discussions. Let's see. Oops. So all those heat maps and all that kind of neat information kind of led us to where we are right now, as well as really a perfect storm of some environmental, an environmental note. If you know anything about the Door Peninsula and right near Green Bay, its bedrock is karst, and karst is notorious for being fragmented and provide fissures. And so if you're land applying manure up here and you've got an aquifer down there, it's exactly what happens. You get a nice transfer mechanism from up here to down there. And then protozoans also like to go from up here to down there, and what you find is Cryptosporidium and Giardia in your wells, and it gets people really upset when that happens. And that did happen about 5 years ago. We had a really warm winter, and the land applying, where you would usually land apply, it wasn't working so well. We got a slug load of manure that got transferred into the groundwater. People were getting sick like crazy. Everybody's pointing their fingers at the DNR. The DNR is pointing their fingers at the Department of Ag, and then the Public Service Commission got involved as well. And so what happened was we came up with this. The Public Service Commission actually originally said, we've got to look at this from a multi-pathway, multi-agency perspective. And so using our heat maps, they originally allocated $6.4 million, and this wouldn't help. This is just scratching just a small part of what John's doing. And so we went out and said, we put it on RFP, and we said, hey, we've got about $6 million and focus on energy funds to create a dairy digester program for small to medium-sized businesses. And guess how many people took us up on it? None. Why? Not enough cash. And then we purposely set the bar kind of like medium to high on scoring. So folks really had to ring a lot of bells and to be able to get the money. And there wasn't any small to medium-sized farms that were going to be able to do that. So we went back to the to Public Service Commission and said, listen, remove the small to medium-sized farm limit and get something a little bit bigger, and we'll put 3 agencies together to work on as a focus group on this. So I was working for the DNR at the time that this was happening, and I wrote the paper supporting why the DNR should get involved in this. It wasn't the energy, it wasn't all the environmental kind of stuff. It was the pathogen destruction that we were most worried about. I saw 3 pages of my report with nothing on it, and the last page that said pathogen, I had it buried on. I learned another lesson: don't ever bury pathogens on page 3 or page 4, you put it on page 1, because I saw a circle with a smiley face. I'm like, not that they love pathogens, but that they saw a method to a means to an ends, right? So pathogen destruction rang the DNR's bell. It also served the purposes for the Department of Ag, and hey, we're going to generate some energy out of this. Well, yeah, we got like 50,000 animal units running around up there, and if you put them through a digester, you're going to generate a little bit of gas. And it turns out, the gas that was originally, the proposal that we got in was going to light up like 6,700 homes or something like that. They've since reduced, we put them through a couple of numerical models, and we've reduced that estimate probably about 20 to 25%, but it's still economically warning. You know what you should be doing is holding up a fork, a spoon, or a plate, because I'm standing between people and their lunch, right? I will wrap it up. So we increased the amount of cash to incentivize folks to do this to 20 million, and we got all kinds of takers. And it took us about a year to go through the RFPs to find somebody, and we do have one now. We awarded a $15 million contract to support and integrate, and we're calling it integrated aerobic digester, because it's just not doing digester and pumping out some gas. It's doing pathogen destruction. It's doing a whole host of things. So it's not going to just be digester, but there's going to be secondary and tertiary treatment after it. And then we're co-locating it with a new landfill in Brown County. So. And where is all this gas going, and what are we going to be doing with it? Well, remember when I said the purchase power agreement, those were like 10 to 12 cents, and we're getting absolutely nothing for it. They're gonna completely bypass it. It's going to be direct injection. So they're going to be doing 2 things: direct injection of pipeline quality gas to the interstate pipeline, and the other thing that they're going to be doing is they're going to tap RNG to fuel fleets. Schneider Trucking is up in the Green Bay area as well as others, and they'll have a commercial tap. We'll be able to fill up gas from that. And so where are we with this project? It has just cleared some of the wastewater permitting and air permitting this fall. I think it's intended to go online next fall in 19. So that's kind of where we're at with that one. On the horizon, why I was talking to these guys here is we're redoing the biogas survey that we did 5 years ago, because those maps need to be refreshed. We need to be able to do some heavier metrics. So we'll be putting together focus groups of folks. That's why I'm here, really, because electrons and gas don't really stop at the borders. They go over the borders. And so we'll be putting out a pretty wide net to get folks involved. We're not going to do this study and say, this is what we learned. We're going to try to learn from folks who really, look to folks to see what they really want us to look at first before we actually do it, because we only do this every 4 or 5 years, and if we get it wrong, then we got to wait for another cycle of funding to be able to do it again. and we'll track the installation and energy production from that hub and spoke. Oh, that's one thing I didn't mention. That digester, that $15 million digester, is a hub and spoke design. So they'll have a centralized digester. They're going to have two methods of getting their feedstock to them. It's either going to be piped or it's going to be trucked. And so they're building pipeline ribs out to folks as well as getting getting it trucked in. And then, so that previous slide, we showed that there, the Public Service Commission actually had $20 million that they allocated to do this. Well, we only spent 15, so we had $5 million left over. It's not really enough to do another full digester, but we have put it in a rural initiatives program that's going to be offering like $8 million in incentives for farmers and in the industry sector, among others in rural communities to do renewable energy. And within that, and we'll be setting out RFPs to be able to do that kind of work as well. So we continue to try to fund and find new ways to incentivize folks to look at their digesters. It will be very interesting because those purchase power agreements go away. It'll be kind of key to take a good inventory and see where folks are going. Anecdotally now, direct injection seems to be a method, either direct injection or turning what large CAFOs are doing and turning it on themselves and using the energy production to just fuel their own to become like carbon neutral. That's what I've got.
Thank you, Tom.
So we're going to open up for questions right now. That's my alarm for.
See? Ha!
You did good.
You didn't need the fork.
I didn't need the fork.
You did good. Any questions? All right.
On the Muscatine plant, have you determined what the return on investment will be? How long?
We anticipate having about a 4-year return on that, just with the tipping fees for the material coming in. The big thing that I really want to make sure we did is that we did not depend on the gas sales to make this project work, because those could go away at any time. And who knows how you're going to do it, and who knows who's going to have the money to pipeline inject or anything else. So I really wanted to build that receiving facility on its own merits, and it should pay itself back relatively quickly. So.
What are your tipping fees compared to a landfill?
We're starting about $40 a ton. Our landfill is $60 a ton. So they're going to be saving, it's actually going to be cheaper to bring to me than it is to go to the landfill. There's no reason why they shouldn't do it. And we're going to have contract prices too for people that want to, that have a lot of stuff coming in, but that's our thing. And our, the liquid waste will come in at about 10 cents a gallon. And I know that's, Des Moines takes it for basically nothing, but it's, we have a lot of stuff on the eastern side. You don't have to truck it clear to the middle of the state. It's going to save a lot of money, even if it's a little bit more expensive than what Des Moines has. So,
I got a follow-up question.
yeah.
And what are you doing, for the haulers that are bringing this stuff in? What are you doing to kind of like assure its quality as a feedstock? So there's not some, like really laden with like silicates or or steroids or what have you.
Yeah, we're not going to be taking rando trucks. They're going to have to be permitted to come in. We're going to have to know their source. We have a pretty good industrial pretreatment program in town. We're going to run it like that. We won't be permitting the generators per se, but we're going to have to know who they are and what they're bringing before they bring it. So we can take the material that we're going to be processing, run it through whatever tests we want, and then make sure that it's going to be something that we can take. So,
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess piggybacking off that, John, you said that you were doing stuff with dog food, and then we learned from Marty earlier that dog food has the vitamins, or whatever. Is that an issue that you guys are running into?
Not vitamins. Wastewater plants take in all that kind of stuff from people every day. The digesters handle that stuff fine. The fields that we apply to don't really care. That doesn't really bother us at all. So yeah, that material is going to be good for us to have. Yeah.
It
Yeah. Yep.
We got time for one more question. Okay, because I have one. I'm confused about power purchase agreements. So you sell your power to a utility company and it's renewable energy.
Yeah.
And they're purchasing it from you at a steal when it goes down to 4 or 2 cents a kilowatt hour. Do they pass that savings on to the consumer or not?
Nice, that was my response. But I can't say that. I can't, I'm politically tied, I can't say that. But I would give that. So, no, they are, no, they are not. They are not. And that's part of the, you know, that's why a lot of this issue runs through the Public Service Commission, because it is a ratepayer issue. But when you're working with a contract per customer, that doesn't have to be, you know, like provided in the public domain. That's really kind of a contract between you and me. And so a lot of the large CAFOs that we had, you know, that were large energy users or are, you know, large customers of a utility, they had a really, you know, in order to incent them early on, they give a pretty decent rate. But now that it has, you know, they've been paying this back for another like 5-7 years. Now the renewed contract is, you know, like, okay, we've got you on the tap now. You know, we'll just offer you this, and it's not just, it's what the market rate is, right? You know, it's the market forces. But no, they are not.
Okay, so I have a big problem with that because it seems really unfair to the digesters to purchase your power for so cheap. I mean, is it cheaper than they can generate it for?
No.
Well, that's where I think the credits kick in.
Yeah.
You know, the EPA has that RFS where those RIN credits are, you know, categorized D3, D5, and they give certain numbers. And we saw yesterday that natural gas sells at $3 a unit. If you get all the incentives like you're supposed to and you're digesting the right stuff, you get $38, 12 times what you're supposed to make. And I think that's kind of the idea of how they're supposed to incentivize and help us. But then we figured out yesterday that food waste is in the wrong category. Food waste only gets 50 cents while the other stuff gets $2.50. And that's where maybe the EPA doesn't have a scientific backing of why this is in certain categories. And that's why I think the industry really hasn't pushed to get something out there. It doesn't matter if we're going to sell it for 2 and 4, if we're going to make, you know, if the EPA, the motherboard, is helping to fuel the industry. So I think, and if we have enough out there, maybe the anaerobic digester sector have a little bit more push than just take whatever they tell us.
Well, let's give our speakers a round of applause. Thank you, guys. We have a small break, and then we will be starting the closing plenary, which we have speakers.